meeting. We are excited to have a topic today that I think many of you are paying attention to because it's been in the news this past month, and that is related to Carnegie classifications. So we have two experts on the topic that are going to be sharing insight and information with you. Before we get started, what we always do is do introductions. So if there is anyone on the call where this is your first time joining MSCC for an all hands meeting, I invite you to unmute and introduce yourself. Everyone's quiet. All right, so we will assume that everyone on the call has been on the call before, which is a good thing. That means that you are finding value in the information that's being shared. Some upcoming events that MSCC is sponsoring this weekend. We have a hackathon that is going for students that is going to be hosted on the campus of Shorter College in Little Rock, Arkansas. That is tomorrow and Saturday. In March, on March 27th, there will be a one-day workshop on the campus of Wilberforce University. And then in April, there will be a workshop on the campus of Coppin State University from on April 9th, 8th through 9th. That's in Baltimore, Maryland. Save the date. MSCC's third annual meeting will be taking place May 28th through 30th in Nashville, Tennessee. Registration will be opening soon. I know many of you have been asking about it and are excited about it to come join MSCC in Nashville. Information will be coming out very soon regarding registration, and it will open up so that you can join. All right, so we're going to jump into it because there's a lot that needs to be covered, a lot of conversation, questions that might be asked. And so we want to put as much time into this next hour for this. So for our Carnegie classification system, Tinny, the screen went. We have two gentlemen who will be presenting for us today. The first will be Dr. Clay Gloster, who is the Dean of the Graduate College of North Carolina A&T State University, and he will be followed by Dr. Jared Riddick, who is a Senior Fellow at the Center for Security and Emerging Technologies at Georgetown University. Again, the Carnegie classification updates came out earlier this month, and it was a lot of discussion about it, at least that I saw on social media and in a lot of different higher education forums. And part of it came because out of the 4,000, approximately 4,000 degree granting colleges in the United States, less than four are one. And for really the second time, an HBCU, Howard University, has made that list. Additionally, there were 14 HBCUs recognized as R2, which is the highest number that we've had. And there's also another classification called research colleges. And on that list, there were 26 HBCUs recognized and two tribal colleges, Dene College and Northwest Indian College, that were recognized for the amount of research dollars that have been spent on those campuses. All land grant HBCUs were recognized on one of those lists, whether it be R1, R2, or as a research college. So Dr. Gloucester and Dr. Riddick are going to discuss why this matters, the impact of classifications on a college, and how colleges can move up in the rankings. We're going to start off with Dr. Gloucester, who is going to share about the work that North Carolina A&T put into moving up in the ranks. For those of you who are unfamiliar, they are an R2 university, but they are very, very, very close to becoming an R1. So he is going to kick it off and discuss the work that North Carolina A&T has put in.
In a second to bring my slides up.
All right.
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
So my name is Clay Gloucester. I'm Dean of the Graduate College here at North Carolina A&T State University, and I'm going to talk about our journey to R1 because truly it is, it has been and continues to be a journey that we're on. Just for those who are not familiar with A&T, A&T is a 1890 land grant institution founded under the Second Morrill Act, where we were trying to give opportunities to people who were not wealthy, right, to go to institutions of higher ed. And the second moral act is when many of the historically Black colleges and universities that were land grant started. A&T's mission is to advance the human condition, basically, and facilitate economic growth, not only in the state, but throughout the country and the world. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but we called them the A&T Four. They're the Greensboro Four. Down the bottom of the slide, they sat down at the Woolworth counter not too far from here on February 1st, 1960, sitting down to make a stance, but standing up against discrimination and standing up for civil rights. We are currently the largest HBCU in the nation. I think we've been experiencing enrollment growth for the past 10 or 11 years. And for several of those years, each year when we surpass our enrollment, the previous year was a record. We're the largest HBCU. We grant more degrees to African American engineers and women than any other four-year institution in the country. And we're proud to report that our MBA program actually is ranked number 79 in the country, right? That's a significant accomplishment. That's not amongst HBCUs, that's amongst all universities throughout the country. I just like to point out the picture in the middle there to the left. Many people are not aware, but we have a joint school of nanoscience and nanotechnology with UNCG. It's also located in Greensboro, right? But that's a $56 million facility where we do state-of-the-art research in nanoscience and nanotechnology. We are, like I said, the #1 public HBCU as recognized by the Wall Street Journal. This year, Money Magazine named us as the #1 for the nation's most affordable doctoral research university. And then the most recent study demonstrated that we had more than a $2 billion annual economic impact on the state of North Carolina. A&T has, this slide says 7 colleges, now 8. We just recently added an honors college. And we typically have more than $100 million in extramural funding. We're typically 3rd in the UNC system in extramural research funding. That's how much funding you receive during one year, right? Typically, we're 3rd behind NC State and UNC Chapel Hill. The other UNC system schools typically have less extramural funding than A&T. And you can see the colleges that we have. So our fall 2024 enrollment was another record. So we currently have over 14,000 students. Within A&T, I'm the dean of the graduate college, which I have the pleasure of serving. And so in the graduate college, we have 14 doctoral programs. We used to say PhD programs, but now we just recently launched a doctoral nurse practice. Many of our PhD programs are in the STEM disciplines, as A&T's been known for engineering for a very long time. So computational data science and engineering, computer science, electrical engineering, industrial systems engineering, mechanical engineering, those are all in the College of Engineering. Some of our first programs, PhD programs, were in electrical and industrial engineering. But now we have a new Ag and Environmental Sciences PhD. Our Applied Psychology PhD will start this fall. We have a joint PhD program in social work with UNC Greensboro. It is truly a joint program in that students are admitted to the program and then they're randomly assigned a home institution of A&T or UNCG. Our joint school of nanoscience and nanoengineering, those programs are really not joint because nanoengineering, the PhD and the master's belong to A&T, where the nanoscience PhD and master's degree belong to UNCG. We also have 33 master's degree programs. I listed a few: the Master of Arts in Teaching. MBA is our largest master's degree program. They have over 150 students in that program. MAT is right around 100 as well. Mental health counseling, MSIT, over 100 students in those programs. Our largest PhD program is in applied science and technology. It's an umbrella PhD program for the College of Science and Technology, so it has lots of concentrations for each department in the college. So it has biology concentrations, physics, IT, tech management, and even STEM education. But that PhD program has well over 100 students in it. It's our largest currently. We also started certificate programs not too long ago, and we're becoming known for our certificate programs because we allow students who would not be admitted to a master's degree program to be admitted to a certificate program. Then you could take 4 classes, for example, in cybersecurity or data analytics, then get your GPA up to the 3.0, right? And then enter into those master's degree programs, which we have. And now you only have 6 courses remaining, right, in that master's program. So those courses stack right into the master's degree program. We're proud of our fall 2024 enrollment of more than 1,800 students, and that's a record for us here at A&T. Let's begin our conversation about our journey to R1, and this is a list of the task force that was created. I think it was created, had to be sometime around 2020, and you see we had wide representation, right? Dean of the Joint School of Nanoscience and Nanoengineering. We had Human Resources in the room, Dean of the College of Engineering, of course, the Graduate College, because we're integral. And then faculty representatives, department chairs. We had our CFO on the committee. Our Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development was on the committee as well. And so this task force was charged with the task of identifying the potential for A&T to become R1 and to make some recommendations to the university as to what we should do to increase our chances to become an R1 institution. And when we started the Carnegie classification for R1, it was a very complicated formula. And in fact, we had websites where we could actually adjust parameters, right, just to see if we increase research expenditures, how far that would move us closer to R1. So research expenditures, STEM versus non-STEM, that was important. Research staff, that was a part of the formula. At that time, we recognized that in order to be R1, you needed not only doctoral degrees awarded, but they had to be in specific disciplines. And at that time, we had no PhD programs in the humanities and the social sciences. Many of our PhDs were in STEM disciplines. And then tenure and tenure track faculty who might dedicate their time to considerable research. So we looked at that formula. As a committee, I recall we met every Friday at 8 a.m. because everybody had a busy schedule, and we met each week to discuss what we could do as an institution to move towards this R1. We also kept in mind that the review cycle occurred every 3 years. And so here we are now in 2025, but the review cycle was in 2024 and they announced in January of 2025. And so the next review cycle will be in 2027, and then they'll announce in January of 2028. So the committee came up with some priorities that the institution should focus on. And the priority one was we need to, as a committee, as a task force, develop a comprehensive plan and strategy. And we needed to increase investments in our institution, not only at the state level, but at the federal level as well. So how could we develop this comprehensive plan that the task force would create and develop and give to the university so that they would sort of have a blueprint to follow as to what were the steps that we needed to take as an institution to move from our R1 status to our R2 status. And that included support for PhD students, master's students, for faculty, research staff, and infrastructure. What I love about North Carolina A&T is, as an institution, whenever we make some goals, right? Whenever we have strategic goals, we align together, we form groups, and we march in lockstep together towards those goals. So a it wasn't a question whether we would get to R1. The question was really when. And so priority two from that task force was that we needed to invest more, right, in doctoral students, right? We need to find ways to increase research productivity, um, increase the number of grants awarded, the funding awarded to faculty members, because that was a part of the metrics, research expenditures, not the amount that came in, but the expenditures themselves. And then we had to invest in research support staff, and create new positions, right? So we needed to create faculty positions that were just focused on research. Maybe these new positions were not focused on the traditional teaching, research, and service. And then identify who we called our research staff. I do remember that in our meetings, we kind of looked at other institutions, and we found that different institutions had different definitions for research support staff. And so we noticed some flexibility there in the guidelines in our pursuit towards R1. And then we needed to incentivize faculty, right? We need to incentivize, create university level incentives to increase their research activity. One such thing is, I know now we have cluster hiring. So the university might identify a new research area, and we hire 3 or 4 faculty members that cross not only disciplines but colleges throughout the university to improve our position as an institution and be able to make contributions to those new research areas. And so, um, and so around May, the task force made their first report to the university, and sort of these were some of the recommendations that the task force made, right? So they recommended a research vision that North Carolina A&T will join the top 4.5 universities in the United States and be recognized as an R1, right? And the top research institution amongst HBCUs. And the timeline was to begin right there, July 1, 2021. And it's interesting because way back in 2021, we said it would take us a minimum of 6 years. And I think right now we're probably following through on just what they said. And we needed the cabinet, the deans, the board of trustees to be accountable for each requirement and recommendation. Another recommendation was around graduate education. And I just specifically wanted to focus on that because as the dean of the grad college, it was placed upon me, right? It was my responsibility to increase the number and diversity of doctoral degrees conferred annually. So if you remember, the first Carnegie classification had not only PhD degrees awarded, but in specific disciplines. And so as an institution, we transitioned from an institution where a dean and a chair would have a conversation about potential new programs, where they would make decisions about new programs based on their feelings that this program might have an opportunity to be successful, to an approach where we are data driven. And so we actually secured external vendors to study new programs. And some of these programs here, health psychology, applied economics, and nursing practitioner, we actually engaged with external vendors to do extensive studies to determine what was the student demand, what was the job demand, the work demand, right, for these particular new programs. Health psychology came out of some data at our institution. Our psychology undergraduate program was one of the largest undergraduate degree programs on campus. And so we thought that that might be a good area to go. And so we constituted these evaluators. They gave us extensive reports, and people think that they always say, yes, you should go in that area, but many of the reports told us, no, we shouldn't go in that area, because you will notice we don't have a PhD in applied economics right now. And so we started on a data driven approach to increase the number and diversity of doctoral degree programs, and to increase our graduate enrollment, particularly in doctoral degree programs. And then identify strategies for attracting new funding for these students. So I think when I first became dean of the grad college, the university, whenever they went out to make requests, gift requests for philanthropy, they would never include graduate education. And so we began to change that in 2021. Other recommendations that came out the committee, there was a lot. I didn't want to put everything up on the slide, but it was about increasing the quantity and the quality of our faculty, not always focusing on assistant professors, hiring assistant professors, but also hiring full professors who had already established research records, increasing research staff, understanding what we identified as research staff. Like I said, many institutions had different definitions. Um, and then we took a look at our research expenditures, and our research expenditures were not in a good place. I think one positive thing that came out of it was we looked at our accounting principles, and we found that if we better counted our current research expenditures, the amounts would go up significantly. They would increase significantly just by increasing the way we counted our research expenditures. For example, we reinstituted a new way to track all of the graduate research assistants on campus, right? So now it's very easy for us to run a report to see how many RAs we have on campus, because those are definitely research staff, and the amount of funding that we provide to those students as well as to research faculty are part of research expenditures. But the greatest thing that we found about our journey to R1 was we identified places in our university's existing infrastructure where we could make improvements, right? We said an R1 institution does not have uh, problems with human resources. They don't have as many problems with their IT infrastructure. They don't have as many problems with research spaces on campus. And so our journey to R1 has not only improved our institution from a perspective of getting closer to that goal, but actually it helps us to each and every day shore up the existing infrastructure in various areas across campus that has made our university much better. So one thing that I can say that was really important about A&T, and I think I was fortunate as the dean to be able to sit here as the dean of a graduate college, was that graduate education became a strategic priority of the university. And so then when we made asks for investments in graduate education, the university was willing to make such investments. I've been at many institutions where graduate education is typically a second thought. And so the journey to R1 was a moving target, right? It was like shooting at a moving target. And so in about November of 2023, they changed the formula. They made it for R1, you only need 50 million in total research spending and 70 research doctoral degrees awarded annually, right, that year. But what's interesting to me that people don't know is that when they changed the formula in 2023, the data that they used was academic year 22-23, right? So the data for R1 selection that was announced in January was based on the 22-23 data. So when they changed the formula, we couldn't make any changes to that data. That data had already been submitted to iPads. So as the dean of the grad school, I came in 2018, so we were trying to increase enrollment, and one way to increase enrollment is by introducing new programs, right? And so we really ramped up, particularly around new PhD and doctoral degree programs, right, in the last several years. And in 1 year, we had 3 doctoral degrees, doctorate degree programs approved. That was a university record. And so you see, we had applied psychology, doctorate of nurse practice, and criminal justice all approved in a single year. Just for a note, our PhD in criminal justice was the first PhD in criminal justice in the state of North Carolina. So other UNC system schools, no other school had a criminal justice PhD program. So that was very good. And that one also was around the fact that we had criminal justice as a bachelor's degree program was one of our largest programs. So going to R1, of course, on the top, it looks like the iceberg. You have success, right? So you get elevated to R1, but there's a lot of things that happen under the surface of the water, right? As the dean of the grad school, now we promote graduate student success, right? Not just student success at the institution. We regularly participate in those committees, and we're interested in the holistic grad student, not just their success academically, but their mental health and well-being. We also had to change many policies and procedures at the institution. The assistantships and fellowships, we had to come up with a new funding model. We had to address the infrastructure of the university. And then we had to address the culture and the climate, right? We were primarily an undergraduate institution trying to transition to R1, which is graduate student focused, more graduate student focused and research focused. So you can see some of the changes that we made since 2018. We increased the number of doctoral students, and you can see intentionally we decreased the number of master's degree students intentionally, right? So we put a focus on doctoral degree students. We added certificate programs, and you can see the enrollment. In 2021, that was another record year, but that was primarily due to the fact that we had HER funding to support graduate students. What we've learned is that the record enrollments in our graduate college are directly correlated to the amount of funding that we supply to grad students. And so here you see degrees awarded. We were tracking, and in 22-23, the year that they highlighted for this for this time, we had 68 doctorate degrees awarded. We were too shy. As an institution, we did meet the research expenditures requirement, but we were only too short. And I wish there was something that we could have done to increase that number, but like I said, the new metrics came out in November and the data had already transpired. The other thing that was interesting to us is we have a fall and a spring graduation, and the fall graduation includes both of the summers before, but when you're tracking degrees award for iPads, they split the summers over 2 years. So you have summer 2, fall, spring, and summer 1 when you're checking your degrees awarded. So also we had, as a part of the task force, a communication plan, try to tell everybody what R1 would look like at A&T. Yes, we were an undergraduate focused institution, and we wanted everybody to remember that even if we make R1, we will still be an HBCU, still have a focus on excellence in teaching. And so we developed communication plans that deans would share, and it would be consistent. So as a part of the task force, not only did we make recommendations, but we have implementation teams that are still actually meeting today. They're going with the recommendations of the task force, and communication plans, etc., are a part of it. So I think a big piece of our journey is supporting graduate students. So I think these are some big points that I just wanted to point out that helped us significantly. We requested and received new appropriations from the state of North Carolina, and those were recurring funds. We also received funding from our university's treasurer's office that are committed to supporting grad students. We work closely with our University Advancement Office. Now I meet monthly with a representative. While I don't have an advancement officer myself, I can meet regularly with them, and we have strategies for increasing funding to support graduate students. And this past academic year, actually this fall, we started a new funding model that we rolled out that actually presents comprehensive funding, right? So our grad students in the past didn't have comprehensive funding, so they get tuition, they get assistantship, and they get health insurance covered. So those are some of the major things that allowed us to move closer towards R1. That's all I have right now. Are there any questions?
Okay. So right now, no one is speaking up, but I like to say that if there are no questions, that means you did. Oh, we do have one question. When you have no questions, that means you did a thorough presentation. Anna Hunsinger does have a question that she would like to ask.
Go right
Thank you,
ahead.
Leslie. And it was such a good presentation. Thank you, Dr. Gloucester. Really appreciate you being here and taking us through this journey, and a journey it has been. Um, this is rather a comment, and again, I really wish you all the best as you continue this journey. As you know, the MSCC is here to support the enablement. In other words, how do we make it possible, real, and simple to use cyber infrastructure, which is a complex term, but it's the IT and tools that can support research and, of course, education. So we're delighted that you're in this journey, especially at this point in time. So just want to express our support on behalf of the MSCC for the things that you're trying to do. And anyway, we wish you all the best also. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have one more question from Camille Gibson from Prairie View, and then we will go into Dr. Riddick's presentation.
Yes, thank you for a very interesting presentation. Your fellow Prairie View is also on that journey to R1. A question in terms of deciding on the PhD programs to add. We used to count the DNP numbers, but now we understand for Carnegie purposes that doesn't count. So in considering the progress, how are you thinking in terms of which PhD programs? No doubt there's regional consideration, as you mentioned, criminal justice, no criminal justice programs there. But in terms of figuring out the landscape, and is the plan to have volume with fewer programs or more PhD programs, and why?
Okay, so I think our initial approach was to significantly increase the number of 2 PhD programs. That's correct. And then we engaged with external vendors, right? And we engaged with faculty on campus. So as a part of the R2 to R1 implementation team, we had a group of faculty that just focused on what new PhD programs we would have. Then we had an external vendor to actually do studies with data, regional, state level, and national data, to prioritize our list. And so we have a list that we're sort of going down, sort of in order of new proposed PhD programs. I can say also a part of our strategic plan was to establish a PhD in every college. We now have one college business that is yet to get one, but now we're kind of slowing down the number, but we're going to continue to increase the number of PhD programs in areas of need and in areas that our faculty have expertise.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gloucester. And we are going to pass it over to Dr. Riddick, who is not only an alum of Howard University, but an alum of North Carolina A&T.
All right. Good afternoon. Yes. Thanks, Leslie, for the introduction. Thank you, Leslie, also for the invite. As some of you may know, I was fortunate to join your meeting, MSCC meeting down in Alabama in October, and make a presentation there. And I've been invited back, and you know that's always a good sign when they invite you back. So thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Tenny, also for the support. Yes, I am a Howard alum, and but I am today on the campus of North Carolina A&T. I'm here for a technology transfer meeting and got a chance to tour some of the facilities here at A&T. And, you know, wow, great presentation, Dr. Gloucester. And I tell you what I saw yesterday, for me, confirms that North Carolina A&T is the premier HBCU engineering program in the nation. Outstanding. They've just been named to a top 25 list for innovation amongst all institutions in the country. So this journey that A&T is on is continuing to gain momentum. We're so proud. I can say Aggie Pride, but I'm also a Howard Bison, so I say HU, you know, first. So today I'm going to, you know, piggyback on the great presentation that Dr. Gloucester made. It will in many ways validate some of the things that I'm going to present. But I'm picking up really where we left off last time, to give sort of an update on on the overall progress of the HBCU enterprise toward top tier research status. I'm gonna struggle with my slides a bit, so hopefully I'll be able to get this through for you guys. So you heard from Dr. Gloucester about R1. There's always you know, been a lot of attention to this, particularly on the behalf of the HBCU community over the past few years. And you know, R1 has meant a lot of different things to a lot of people. I think the Carnegie classification folks have made a concerted effort to have people not see it as a ranking system, but really as a classification. Started around 1970, and but we do know that over time, those R1, those top tier institutions have been the benefactors of greater funding, having more quality faculty, and really having a much greater reputation around research. So it is in many ways a badge of honor, one that folks have chased. And just want to get a few meanings out here first. Dr. Gloucester made the point that R2, which is the sort of the next level down from R1, whereas R1 is very high research activity, R2 is high research activity. The definition for R2 has endured since around an adoption in 2015 to be a threshold of $5 million of R&D expenditure annually and conferring 20 research doctorates. I love the presentation that Dr. Gloucester made because he talked about some of those decisions that were being made internally at A&T as they were thinking about this, because back in 2018, there were 10 parameters that Carnegie considered to determine R1 status. In 2025, significant change. And that change was undertaken to simplify the process. And so going from those 10 parameters and this very complicated principal component analysis that they used to use, to in 2025, just two thresholds, $50 million for R&D expenditure, 70 research PhDs conferred in a year. And those are the thresholds that beginning in 2025 would be used to determine who's in R1. So just to recap, when I came to MSCC before, at that time, there were no HBCU R1s because the 2018 criteria were being used at that time. And in then, you know, when I came to MSCC, the latest data that had been used by Carnegie, as Dr. Gloucester pointed out, was 2021 data. Now, my last job in the Pentagon, I was instrumental in establishing the HBCU UARC that is currently at Howard and has 9 schools in the consortium. And in the lead up to establishing the UARC, I did some analysis for the Pentagon to really look at this notion of, can the UARC be instrumental in helping some of our R2s move to R1? At the same time, Congress passed a law in the National Defense Authorization Act. It's called Section 223, and that law really authorized the Defense Department to use some of their research funding to help encourage minority institutions to move from R2 to R1. So at the time in 2021, no R1 HBCUs. This is the list of the R2 HBCUs as they existed in 2021. There were 11 schools, and we're pretty familiar with who those are. I heard Prairie View chime in today. They're, of course, on that list as well. So, and then as Dr. Glosser pointed out, around 2023, there were all these headlines that came out about Carnegie moving, changing the thresholds for R1. I have a QR code on some of these charts. If you hit those as you see them, it'll take you to some of these articles that you can keep for after. But the announcement was made. There are all sorts of headlines. And so that led me to want to take a look. As I said, I had done some analysis in the Pentagon. There was a law that existed that encouraged the Defense Department to do some of this work, but all of those laws were based on the 2018 criteria, those 10 parameters, that principal component analysis. Now we're going to move to these two thresholds. And so my question was, how is that going to impact HBCUs who are on this journey to R1? And you saw Dr. Glosser talk about this, some of that, how it created some internal sort of turmoil for them as they had established it. He called it sort of a moving goalpost. So what I did was I took historic data, going back, every 3 years from 2021, look at 2015, 2018, and put all of the data for the R2 HBCUs onto one plot here, where we're looking at number of PhDs across the bottom and R&D expenditure at the top, going across the top. And, you see some dotted lines here. There's one that's the $50 million threshold that goes across the middle of the chart. Up the middle of the chart, you see the 70 PhD threshold. So that pink box in the corner, if your dot falls in that box, you're meeting both of the thresholds for R1. And when I looked at the 2021 data, there were some interesting things that we did to sort of parse the data a little bit. You see some clusters that develop in the data. And so through that, I was able to have some discussion. You see that now the cluster that I have sort of filled in there, that's the Howard data. And that's 2015, 2018, and 2021. You see that one of the dots there is in the pink. This is why when Carnegie came out in 2023, this is very likely that Howard is going to be an R1. And in fact, Carnegie wrote there will be lots of celebration because we will have an R1 HBCU. My question was, what about the other 10 R2s? So there's one other cluster in here that contains data that surpasses both of the thresholds for, begins to surpass thresholds. So I looked in there, and there was a trend there of data across the top. Now, typically, when I looked at this historic data, 2015 to 2018 to 2021, there's no real pattern. Even in the Howard data, you look there, it's 2015, you're out here, it's this data sort of moves around. This trend line here in the data is the only institution that sort of has a trend from year to year going over these 3-year jumps, and that's North Carolina A&T. So when I looked at that, my conclusion is if A&T, this was back when I was looking at 2021 data, before the announcement for Carnegie data, if A&T continued on that trend, somewhere beyond 2027, they would cross into the threshold. But the very keen observation that Dr. Glosser made is that this data, when they're making the update, they're using the data from a year before, at least 2 years back. So if in the 2027 timeline, A&T crossed that threshold, then you would get a declaration of R1 somewhere around 2029, right? So I was saying then, based on the 2021 data, somewhere beyond 2027, A&T would make R1. And it's very clear from the data, they were on a path. I think there's a QR code on this chart, but I put out a report looking at some of this data and put some conclusions there. Howard clearly was already over R1, so we would look for an announcement there. A&T was within striking distance and on a trend. But for the rest of the schools, the rest of the R1s, essentially they would have to double their R&D expenditure, double their PhD conferrals, or both to make R1. And so this was not really considered a near-term goal, but long-term strategies would potentially get them there. So then, I have also a policy brief coming out where we're putting out some recommendations. We've looked at, some of the sorts of, based on 2025, and Dr. Glosser talked about this a lot. How do you need to configure yourself? Back under the 2018 criteria, it's really important that you have non-STEM degrees. Now we looked at the top STEM, the top R1 schools and found that many of them have about 44% STEM PhD. So when you look at an institution like A&T, that's very STEM heavy in their PhD, they are built in a way that is really similar to some of the top performers. And also those STEM PhDs create R&D expenditure much more than non-STEM PhDs. So when you talk about maintaining R1, having a higher mix of STEM PhDs puts you in a better position for maintenance based on the research we did. Another characteristic of those high-performing R1s is that they have about 30% or greater of institution funding invested in their R&D expenditure. Now, that institution funding that they're investing typically comes from endowment income. And so this is a challenge for HBCUs and minority serving institutions in general that would have smaller endowments. But this is an area that really needs to be faced head on, because it is the endowment income that's creating this institutional expenditure that allows these schools to maintain the high performance in R1. So as we all heard today, the announcement was made around February 13th or so. It was announced by Carnegie that Howard has R1 status. In our last meeting, we had sort of predicted that, knew it was coming, but we're here. And it's very important that we make the point that Howard has regained R1 status, because Howard was an R1 from 87 to 2005. In 2005, there were some changes to the Carnegie criteria, and the status went away. But we really want to use that word regains, because we don't want to get into oh, you made it because they changed the rules. Well, the rules have changed before, and they change all the time. And one of the rules changes saw Howard excluded, and this time around, based on good work, they've regained their status. So Howard made it, but what about the rest? And so this made me go back and sort of revisit some things. So we looked at, in 2021, when I was looking at the 2021 data, in fact, to do, the presentation I did before, the 2023 data from HERD had really not been released. That 2023 data just sort of came out. So I put the 2023 data onto the same sort of plot, and guess what we see from A&T? So that trend that was very flat and leading us over here, you see a complete hockey stick. And I think this is a result of the effort that Dr. Glosser talked about that they put in to really focus. You see the immediate sort of action of that. And, it will be very clear. I think the next update is 2028. Very clearly, we expect to see A&T in the next update, because in the 2026 to 2027 timeframe, they should have those numbers. They're well on the way. And so we definitely expect to see in the next update A&T cross the line. I need to talk about Morgan State, because we now are hearing more and more and more about the presence of Morgan State in this conversation. Back when I looked at the 2021 data, here's what Morgan State looked like. They were back in the pack. And they were among those schools that needed to double their R&D expenditure to even be considered, even though they had crossed the 70 PhD threshold many times in the past. Now adding the 2023 data, wow, look at that surge. Morgan State's here. And so their funding has significantly increased. And this is not even including some of the state funding that we know is out there that shall show up. And so we can think about, perhaps not in the next update, but certainly in the 28 to 2030 timeframe, you'll see Morgan State come in as well. So where are we going? I think potentially, and this is a prediction I'm willing to stand behind, in the next 3 to 5 years, we will have 3 R1 HBCUs. We consider this a baseline analysis. There's all sorts of chaos going on. We don't know what's happening. But based on what we see now, this can be a baseline for where we'll be in the next 3 to 5 years. I then have had people say to me, hey, you need to look at the quote unquote R3s. Right. And I said, well, R3s are not a thing. And then people talk to me. I said, well, we have the data. So what we're talking about is, and there's a new category in Carnegie that I'm not addressing with this. I'm defining my own category here. R3 HBCUs are schools that are aspiring to R2. They perform research. They expend R&D dollars. They confer research PhDs. And so I took all the data from those schools, from the 2023 data, and put it on a similar type of grid, where here you can see the red dotted line. This is the 20 PhD line. That's the level for R2. And then the $5 million expenditure line. So if you fall in the pink box here, you have met R2 criteria. And this is my first time looking at it. When I first looked at this 2023 data, lo and behold, there will be 4 new R2s in 2025 was my first discovery. There is also some more, here, and I'll go through it in the next charts. But those 4 new R2s were announced along with Howard's R1. So this is 4 schools that were either new to R2 or returning. So Hampton University, Virginia State, Delaware State, and South Carolina State are all now R2s. We should applaud that vociferously. And we go to the next chart, and we see that in that green box there, we have 3 dots. And those are schools that have the $5 million, but don't have the 20 PhDs. I want to point out also a couple of schools in this gray box. So in that gray box, these are schools that don't have the $5 million, but look, there are 2 schools there that have more than 15 PhDs in a year, right? So with just a little more R&D expenditure, you'd have then a group of 5 schools that are on the cusp of R2. So where are we going between now and 2030? 3 R1s that will have achieved R1. And so their strategy should really be about maintaining and growing the status. We have those R2s that were existing. And so that will be 8 schools there that have had the R2 status and will retain it. And then 9 more schools that are on the cusp and between now and 2030. And so you're talking about potentially having 3 R1 HBCUs and 17 R2 HBCUs by 2030. And so what does this mean? I think we're talking about how we maintain the status. I'm looking at those goals of 44% STEM, 30% institution funding as goals. That big body of R2s really creates a test bed for all sorts of innovation, commercialization, and entrepreneurship. I know there will be a sort of a desire on the part of those schools to say, hey, we're going to R1. I mean, it's a long-term strategy. In the R2 space, there is good work to be done around innovation and commercialization that could also contribute to accelerating the growth of endowments. And then finally, these schools play a role of being connective tissue between this innovative research and the communities where they exist because of the type of research that they focus on, whether it's in sickle cell, diabetes, or fintech, financial literacy. And so having more of these schools producing PhD level research really gives the opportunity to shape the economic well-being of the communities where they exist, and also the long-term goal of the DoD to increase research capacity of these schools. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Riddick, for coming back and sharing with us again. You and I have talked multiple times about this. I'm always fascinated looking at the data and looking at all of the information regarding HBCUs and the journey to R2, R1, and just in general, the amount of output that these colleges are doing in research. Everyone on the call understands the importance of making sure that all people are involved in innovation. And so HBCUs, of course, need to be included in that conversation. And again, our tribal colleges as well, making sure that we are working to increase their research capabilities for that same purpose. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask?
Just one quick question.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Oladipupa.
It's Oladipupa from Hampton. With what's happening at the federal level, how does that impact, or does it impact our match to R1 from HBCU? Given that we're hoping, we're not hoping, but we're expecting some reduction or renegotiation of our IDC downwards.
Yeah, like I said, I would consider what I've shown you today a baseline analysis, right? So we know that this is where we are and the progress that is underway without any disturbance. I think there will be changes clearly based on what's going on at the federal level. But it's really interesting. I looked at a couple of the schools who are new to R2, and in a couple of those cases, if all of their federal money went away, they still have $5 million in research expenditure. And so that's an interesting factor to factor in. But I think if that federal money went away, some of those PhDs may go away, right? So it's not just if the money goes away, you still got the money. It is the whole mix. You take the federal money away, some of the research goes away that leads to those 20 PhDs. But I think, the fact of the matter is, with the chaos that's going on at the federal level, I think there's a need for us to think about other ways of supporting what we're doing. At the R1 level, that's not easy because you've got to have the $50 million expenditure. And, that's been built on federal support across the board. But when you're talking about, the R2 threshold, And again, this isn't just about chasing the classifications, but the behavior that goes with that. So the behavior of having research expenditure, having 20 PhDs a year, and then you look at that across the enterprise. If we have 17 to 19 schools that are R2, that's about 400 PhDs per year. That is a portfolio of research that leads to significant innovation. And so, I think about this really in terms of the enterprise. I'm also looking for people to, lean into other avenues of support beyond federal. So your state funding is very important, right? Your relationships with other funders, extraordinarily important. But I also believe that, HBCUs have enjoyed bipartisan, bicameral support. There's a bipartisan, bicameral HBCU caucus, and, we'll have to just see how things play out.
Are there any more questions or comments? All right, so I'm going to thank.
Leslie, I
ahead.
did have one more shameless plug. So I did recently have an article in HBCU Digest that contains some of the data I presented today. And in fact, there is a GitHub associated with that article that has all of the raw data. So if anyone here wants to access that data and use it, it's available there in the article on HBCU Digest.
Thank you. All right, so thank you again, Dr. Riddick and Dr. Gloucester, for all of the information. I'm going to turn it over to Anna Hunsinger. She has a question or a comment.
Thank you. I think we're nearing time. So also, thank you, Dr. Riddick. What a great presentation. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure that some of us are going to be thinking of additional questions to follow up with. Real quick, I wanted to take this opportunity again, first, again, a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you so much for being able to join us and for sharing your perspectives and the work that you're doing. We wish you all the best also as we navigate these interesting times. So I'd like to take just a moment to introduce you on behalf of the MSCC to a new member of our staff. So I'm going to ask her very quick just to say hello. Ms. Jessica Johnson has joined the MSCC as our new cyber infrastructure facilitator. You're going to get to hear more from Jessica. She will probably be reaching out. You'll be seeing more of her name. Ms. Jessica is a graduate of Tuskegee University and also Iowa State University. So Jessica, could you just say a quick hello so everybody can see your beautiful face?
Thank you so much, Anna. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here and support you all's institutions in strengthening your research in computing and data capabilities. As Anna mentioned, I look forward to connecting with many of you all and continuing the great work of expanding access to CI resources, training opportunities. So I'm really looking forward to working together with you all.
Thank you, Jessica. And also a call out to all the staff that supports the MSCC. Thank you for all that you do. So we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to put also a plug for the annual meeting of the MSCC in the slides you saw. We're really excited about going to Nashville at the end of May, and we hope that all of you can participate and join us in Nashville. Also, please know I am the principal investigator for the NSF funded activities for the MSCC. Anna Hunsinger, I'm going to put my email address. Please reach out to me for any questions, opportunities to collaborate, and consider me as your primary point of contact too as well. And again, we really look forward to continuing these important conversations with all of you. I hope everybody's doing well. Please take care of yourselves and yours. And I think we're going to wrap it up and give everybody, now we're at time. So thank you so much again for joining us. And we hope to see you at our next All Hands meeting. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.